Hi, and welcome to Shamokin, Pennsylvania, an anthracite coal mining town in eastern PA and my hometown. Shamokin has a rich history. The coal mines and garment mills of this area provided great jobs for the hardworking people who lived here. Many fortunes were made, and often the successful left their mark in brick and stone. However, since peaking in the mid-20th century, a lot of those industries have left, and the population has declined by more than half, with many buildings and homes left to decline as well, leaving only names as vestiges of the city's golden age. I'm Andy Twigger, and I grew up in Shamokin. This was home to me, and in a special way, it will always be home. While time has been tough on the community, there are good things happening all around us. People are investing, and a revitalization is underway. I've always been attracted to old buildings with good architecture and the stories they tell. When the opportunity came up to preserve some buildings in Shamokin, I jumped at the chance. This is a collection of some of the stories and a look into the history and some of the future of these grand old structures. These are my Shamokin stories, my hometown. Welcome to the Bottling House in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. This is the former Fuhrmann Schmidt Brewing Company headquarters, bottling plant, and stables built in 1896. This building kind of came to me on a whim. I was interested in another building that was going to tax sale. The county will occasionally sell parcels that are back due on taxes to recoup their losses, and this building was on the list. It was in pretty rough shape. It was pretty beat up architecturally. You could still tell, though, that it had great bones. I knew a little bit of the history about it, knew that it used to be affiliated with the brewery, but I didn't know how. You could see some of the architecture poking out from under the current facade. It just had a great lines to it, great architectural history. It had a lot of work done to it over the years to cover up the original facade and the original lines of the building. But you could still see them peeking out. You could still sense that they were there. And it just had great industrial architecture. So I decided to go after it at the tax sale. And lo and behold, I was the only one who bid on it. Maybe that says something about it, but and I tell people I paid $500 for it. I paid a little bit more than that, but not much more. And you certainly get what you pay for. It took about a month after I purchased the property for the deed to transfer. And within that first week of the deed transferring, it was a Sunday. I'm loading up the kids to go from Bethlehem to Shamokin. And I get a phone call, and it's the chief of police. And he says, "Your building's crumbling into the street." So I loaded up the kids. We drove up. We pulled under the side street here. We got out of the car, and we started looking around and examining what's going on. There's maybe 30 bricks lying in the corner of the building, lying on the sidewalk and into the street. The police chief was there, several other officers. The fire chief was there, the code inspector, several city council folk, and the current mayor, my friend John Brown, all kind of assembled here looking at the corner of the building with me. And I said to Mayor Brown, "What's with the big showing?" And John said, "We called you and told you that your building was crumbling." I said, "Yeah, that's why I showed up." And John says, "Well, you have to understand, we make that call all the time. Nobody ever shows up." Okay. So that's kind of a snippet into what's going on currently in the city of Shamokin. We've got an economically depressed area that we're fighting hard to revitalize, and this is just one more piece of that puzzle. So hopefully we can make this into a real success story for the city. So this building was built in 1896 by Fuhrmann Schmidt. One of the first major actions they did together as their partnership started that same year. Brewing history in Shamokin goes back, of course, way earlier than that. Most notably in 1854 with the construction of the Eagle Brewery on the north end of Tharptown, about 2 miles outside of town here. In 1893, Philip Fuhrmann bought the Eagle Brewery, operated it until 1896 when Max Schmidt partnered in with him. In 1912, F&S bought the Shamokin Brewing Company, which had their main plant down on Harrison Street in the 5th Ward, which would later become their main brewing operation. In 1953, F&S was the 69th largest producer of beer in America. By 1960, they were the 47th largest producer of that time. 5 years later, in 1965, they were the 24th largest producer, producing a little bit more beer than they did just previously 5 years ago. So you can see how that consolidation in the industry really was just knocking out, taking away all the other small producers. One of the great ways we look into the history of what happened with these buildings, how the city developed itself, is with the Sanborn map. Sanborn fire insurance maps were developed in the 1800s and offer just such great glimpses into the past. In 1891, the city has expanded and a flour and feed store can be shown at the location of the F&S building. It, as well as a house next door, are both in yellow, meaning that they're made out of wood. In the 1901 map, the Fuhrmann Schmidt building first appears. In the 1922 map, F&S is now listed as the F&S Brewing Company in bouillon cubes, probably with some foresight into the oncoming Prohibition era. The 1929 map shows F&S as the F&S Brewing Company mayonnaise manufacturers, again reflecting the Prohibition era. The location of this plant was chosen due to its proximity to the railroads, which ran right outside the front door. This gave them excellent access to shipping. F&S operated out of this facility from the time they built it till 1954, when they sold the building to the VFW, the Veterans for Foreign War. The VFW used it as a meeting hall, a restaurant, a bar. When the VFW built the building, they built it out to their needs, and that included filling in the floor space from the original floor of the warehouse to which included the loading docks that we're standing on. And they built the floor out to make it all one level. And that was their main bar area. It took a little bit to wrap my head around what was going on with this. I had to literally crawl over some garbage to get to the old stairwell. Took me down into this level and then down into the basement below to figure out that this was actually open as an interior loading dock. So the building was built pretty purposely with offices on the far side, on the west side of the building. The center was the operations for the bottling and trucking operations for the plant. And then the right side of the building were built out as stables. The offices were very nicely appointed. They had a lot of hardwoods, a lot of mahogany, a lot of carved wood. Unfortunately, it's the section of the building that took the most damage from the roof collapses. The stable section of the building is built with an oversized door to bring the horses in and out. And the second floor was used for hay storage. There's a hoist above the exterior door on the second floor, was used for hauling hay up into the second floor. So in the mid-1980s, the VFW sold the building, and it went through several hands at that point with several restaurants over the years, and ultimately ended up in a position where somebody was just literally storing garbage in the facility. They weren't taking care of it. The roof of the building collapsed into the second floor, which then collapsed into the first floor on both ends of the building, causing major damage, major headaches, and major structural work that we had to do to repair this. When we repaired the back side of the building where the bricks crumbled out, we actually had to knock down a full section of the first floor wall to get machinery inside to be able to handle and assist with getting all the debris out of the building. So all in, each floor is about 3,400 square feet of space. There are multiple levels. There are multiple rooms that's built out now. But I'm going to be building it out to a vanilla box shape. Vanilla box meaning I'm going to provide the roof. I'm going to seal the building up, make it sure it's watertight. While the building would support any number of tenant uses, you can kind of imagine how a brewery in this space would capitalize on not only the passion that beer lovers have for beer itself, but also on the passion they have for beer history. This is an old brewery building. There's very few of them out there. You put those two together, and I think you've got a good recipe for something pretty cool. It was a big gamble when I bought this building. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money in the big picture of things to purchase it. The renovation that I've already put in just to stabilize the building has been a good-sized dollar amount. But the reason to do it was I've seen too many beautiful buildings torn down throughout town and throughout the city and the area. Some of them due to neglect, some of them due to mismanagement, some of them just due to the changing of the times. It's hard, it's expensive, and it's dedicated work to keep these old buildings standing. And I didn't want to see another one end up in the, as a parking lot in the city. So that was my reason for purchasing the property.